Hello guys, today's another book review, and today I want to review an anthology collection called Or Fright 17 Turbulent Tales by Stephen King and Beth Vincent. And this book again is an anthology book, so it's a bunch of different stories by various authors, and the stories involve flight. They involve the fears. They involve everything that can go horribly wrong when flying. So I'm going to review every single story in this anthology. And also give my 2 cents on why I think that this should not be, give my 2 cents on why this should not be all together. The first story is Cargo. I don't get why this is in the collection. Cargo. It's about the Jonestown, but the Jonestown, whatchamacallit, the Kool-Aid thing. It goes absolutely nowhere. Then they taking the bodies out. It goes absolutely nowhere. Arthur Conan Doyle, The Horror of the Heights. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, of course, he wrote Sherlock Holmes, The Lost World, and a bunch of other various stories across his lifetime. The Horror of the Heights is a horror story about flight, and it's a period piece. It's a period piece. That's the best way to explain it. Sorry if I'm not giving much of an explanation, but let's just say none of these really match, I find. Horror of the Heights is a horror story, though. At least there's a fear of flying, albeit, but it's a period piece, so it's not really relevant to today's flight, to be honest. And is it a good story? It's okay, honestly, as a period piece at least. Richard Matheson, Nightmare 20,000 Feet. This was actually Richard Matheson. He wrote Iron Legend and stuff like that. But Nightmare 20,000 Feet was an episode for the Twilight Zone. So if you're familiar with the Twilight Zone episode, Nightmare 20,000 Feet, where a gremlin invades a plane and basically is tearing the engine out to make the plane crash, and this guy's seeing it, but no one else is seeing it, so he's either going crazy or he needs to help stop this crash. So it's just basically that episode, basically. Ambrose Bierce, The Flying Machine. I can't even remember Ambrose Bierce. That story, I don't even remember it. It's just a 2-page story. It was an essay on something. Lucifer. Lucifer was about I can't even remember what Lucifer was about. That's the funny thing. The 5th category, I can't even remember that. Sorry, I'm skipping through a bunch of stories here, but I think a lot of these stories were forgettable. I can't remember half of these things. Tom Bissell's The 5th Category, can't even remember what that was about. Dan Simmons, 2 minutes, 45 seconds. I remember that being neat, but I don't remember, what the hell really happened in it. That's the thing with a lot of these stories. These stories, a lot of these don't make a lot of sense. Cody Goodfellow, Diablitos, I can't remember that. And I read this collection not that long ago. I didn't read this, years ago. I read this years ago, and I still remembered every part clear as day. The Gunslinger. John Burley's Air Raid. I think this is the one where they go through time. I'm not sure. Joe Hill's You Are Released. I remember this because I read this twice. I actually own this story twice. It's in a collection called Full Throttle. It's a very good story. It's a very political kind of story in a sense. About them flying up in the sky and then looking out and seeing nukes. And seeing nukes. Nukes are getting launched. And, yeah. And also, where they're going to go, where the hell they're going to land, and also, are they even able to go anywhere? Next story is David J. Shaw's I can't remember that. Warbirds, I can't remember anything about that. Ray Bradbury's The Flying Machine. Some guy invents some machine that can fly up high, but the emperor does not want anyone to see that, so they execute him. That's period piece, end of story. That's really the whole story in a couple sentences. Bev Vincent, Zombies on a Plane. Well, the editor of this book is Bev Vincent. Zombies on a Plane is one of the worst stories I've ever read in my entire life. So bad, in fact, I actually can't even remember it. But I remember this one being especially awful. Royal Dolls, They Shall Not Grow Old. I remember this being very good, but I can't remember anything about it. Peter Tremaine's Murder in the Air. Murder in the Air is interesting. It's basically a murder mystery. And they're just figuring out who did it. It's kind of a simplistic one, but it's really neat. Stephen King's a turbulence expert, which is probably Stephen King's worst short story. Holy crap, is it horrible? It's really lazy, to be honest, and it's not very good. I'm sorry I can't give more detailed explanation, but I just can't. And James L. Dickey's Falling, which is a poem I can't even remember. Yes. I read this not that long ago. I read this a couple months ago. I can remember everything else I ever read. This is the most forgettable collection, this forgettable pile of crap I've ever read in my life. You know what? You know what? There's a couple decent stories in here, a couple cool stories. So this gets a 2 out of 5. I think it's one of the worst collections of stories I've ever seen. You know where this is gonna go? You know where this is gonna go? So that's gonna go. What's funny is that I bought this brand new. I bought this copy brand new when it came out. So excited to read it because, oh, look, there's this cool collection of flight stories. That is an interesting concept, but it goes nowhere. And that's why it's a terrible piece of garbage. Now, just so we don't end on a bad thing, so we don't end on a bad book. That was an exceptionally awful book, but you know what? I'm doing a double review. Now, this book came out first, but I saved this book for last just because I want to end on a good note. So this is one of the darkest books I ever had the pleasure of reading. Now, this is called Revival. And Revival came out in 2013. This next one came out in 2018, I believe. I don't even know. I know the copy came out in 2019, but the hardcover was 2018, I think. I don't know. Revival is about a minister's family who comes to a town called Harlow, Maine, and a kid named Jamie Morton, who is doing a battle with his toy soldiers, who cares, gets to meet the Reverend Charles Jacobs and his beautiful wife and his son. Now everything's fine, and this Reverend, he's bringing a whole lot of greatness to this town. Until a tragedy strikes this Reverend and his family, and the tragedy is so terrible that it makes him turn on God, and he doesn't believe in God anymore. And he says, how can there be a God how can there be a God in a world where his wife and son died such a horrible death? So he goes insane, and he basically leaves the town after this final terrible sermon. That's what they call it, the terrible sermon. So after the terrible sermon, he leaves the town, and life goes on without him. And then as Jamie gets older, he starts having just more stuff starts happening in his life. A drug addiction, a lust addiction, all this other kind of stuff, addictions and all that. Until he meets Charlie Jacobs again. When now he's called Dan Jacobs, I believe it's Dan. Oh, it's one of the first Stephen King books I read. So he meets Dan Jacobs. That's what his name is by now. And Dan tells him tells him that he can cure people, and even shows that he can cure people, apparently. And apparently it all works. So he cures Charlie, and then eventually just weird stuff starts happening. And that makes Charlie go into basically a frenzy, and he decides that and Charlie decides that he needs to know the truth about the afterlife. What is in the afterlife? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Is there only hell? Is there only heaven? What is the afterlife? Is there an afterlife? They need to find out answers, and he also needs to find out how Charlie can basically revive the true spirit of people. But he also realizes that this revival thing is truly wicked in a way. And that's what I'm going to leave it on, because this book has one of the darkest endings you'll ever read in fiction. And I personally think this is the darkest ending to any book I have ever read. Ever. Now this book, chills thinking about it. This book, it's dedicated to Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, H.P. Lovecraft, who originally wrote the Cthulhu mythos, Clark Ashton Smith, no idea who that is, Donald Wandre, Fritz Leiber, August Derleth, who helped publish some of the Cthulhu mythos, Shirley Jackson, who wrote Haunting Hill House, Robert Bloch, who wrote what the hell was it called, Psycho, and also wrote for the Cthulhu mythos, and Peter Straub, who wrote the Ghost Story, and Arthur Mack. So it's dedicated to some of the great horror authors. There's even a quote in here by Lovecraft: "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die." That's the opening page to this book. Now, this book is one of the scariest books I ever read, and also get you thinking too. It also get you terrified of dying. Jesus Christ, this is one of the scariest books ever written. This is a perfect book, and this is a masterpiece by Stephen King. Stephen King, I don't think he writes really that much horror. He has horror scenes, but he doesn't really write horror. Like, it's kind of hard for him to scare you, to be honest. But with the concept of revival, the execution of revival, and all this other stuff, this makes it the scariest novel. This also makes it one of his, not his best book. This is his best. But it makes it one of his best. And also makes it his best of his current stuff. So this book actually gets a 5 stars just because it is a perfect book. Alright, that is a double feature review, and I am out.